Tom Orr, the legendary outdoorsman from the History Channel's Mountain Men, is alive and living a quieter life in Florida as of 2025. Now 81 years old, he is officially retired from television and the rugged frontier life that made him famous. After years of braving the brutal winters of Yaak, Montana, Tom and his wife Nancy decided to move to Ocala, Florida, seeking a more comfortable environment and to be closer to family as they grow older. Though he has stepped away from the camera, those close to him say he still maintains his love of the outdoors, spending much of his time crafting leather goods, fishing, and sharing stories with friends and neighbors. Tom's decision to leave Mountain Men wasn't abrupt. In interviews before his retirement, he often spoke about the toll that Montana's harsh winters took on his body. "I'm not as tough as I used to be," he once said, acknowledging that age had caught up to him. Fans worried when he stopped appearing regularly on the show, sparking rumors about his health, but reports from sources close to the Orrs confirmed that he remains in good health for his age, simply choosing peace and privacy over the demanding life of a reality TV figure. Though Tom lives far from the rugged wilderness he once called home, his influence on the show and its audience remains strong. Reruns of Mountain Men continue to draw steady viewership, and fans frequently express admiration for his authenticity and humility. Many credit him with inspiring a new generation to reconnect with nature and learn traditional survival skills. The History Channel has even revisited some of his most memorable moments in special anniversary episodes, celebrating his contribution as one of the show's founding personalities. Tom and Nancy's days are now slower, filled with small routines. Neighbors in Florida describe them as kind and approachable, often seen tending to their garden or chatting with visitors who recognize Tom from television. Despite his fame, Tom has never sought attention, remaining humble and grounded. "I never thought people would care about what I do," he once remarked. "I just lived the way I wanted, and somehow that mattered to folks." As of late 2025, there are no confirmed plans for Tom to return to television. Producers from Mountain Men have left the door open for potential guest appearances, but those close to him suggest he is content to let that chapter remain closed. For Tom, life's greatest rewards were never about cameras or fame. They were about the freedom of the wilderness, the satisfaction of hard work, and the quiet companionship of Nancy by his side. Even in retirement, his legend endures. Fans continue to send letters and gifts, thanking him for showing the beauty and hardship of a life lived close to the land. Tom Orr may have left the mountains, but the mountains will never leave him. In many ways, Tom Orr's story feels like the final chapter of a kind of America that's quietly fading away. An America of self-reliance, craftsmanship, and unbreakable connection to the land. Those who knew him in Montana say he embodied the old frontier spirit better than anyone alive. He wasn't playing a role for the cameras. He was the real thing. Whether he was hand-stitching a pair of moccasins by firelight, tanning a hide in the freezing wind, or hauling wood through waist-deep snow, every movement came from decades of experience and instinct. People who visited the Yaak region during his years there recall a man who could fix, build, or hunt anything. He lived simply without pretension, often trading handmade goods or labor instead of money. His home, built with his own hands, was a small cabin surrounded by wild forest, where wolves howled at night and moose wandered through the yard. Those who met him often left describing the experience as stepping back in time, meeting someone who had refused to let the modern world swallow him whole. Since moving to Florida, life has naturally changed. The biting cold and endless snow have been replaced by warm, humid air and gentle mornings filled with the sounds of birds and cicadas. Instead of chopping wood, Tom tends to his small garden, and instead of trapping in the early dawn, he now enjoys leisurely walks and visits from old friends. Yet, according to those who've spoken with him recently, that spark, that quiet fire that defined him, is still there. He still carves, still works leather, still takes pride in the things he can make with his hands. Fans often wonder if he misses Montana, the isolation and the raw edge of survival. Friends say he does, deeply. He keeps photos of the Yaak cabin and sometimes talks about the winters that tested his strength and the summers that made him feel truly alive. But he also recognizes that life moves forward and that there's wisdom in knowing when to step back. "The mountains are still there," he once said, "and I'll always be part of them. But you can't fight time. You just learn to walk alongside it." Nancy, his lifelong partner, remains his steady anchor. The two have been together for more than half a century, surviving challenges that would break most people. Their bond, tested by wilderness life, seems unshakable. She has often said that Tom's strength comes not just from his skills, but from his heart, his patience, humor, and love for the simple things. Together they built a life that most could only imagine, one filled with quiet courage and self-sufficiency. Despite his retreat from public life, Tom Orr continues to inspire countless people. Online forums and fan pages share stories, photos, and handmade crafts inspired by his work. Young outdoorsmen and women still write to him, hoping for advice or just to say thank you. For them, Tom isn't just a TV personality. He's a symbol of authenticity in a world that's forgotten what that means. In the end, Tom's legacy goes far beyond television. It's written in the lives he's touched and the values he's helped keep alive: respect for nature, the dignity of hard work, and the peace found in simplicity. As he enters his twilight years, surrounded by the warmth of family and the memories of a life well lived, Tom Orr remains exactly what he's always been: a man at peace with the land, the seasons, and himself. And somewhere, when the evening light fades and the Florida air turns still, you can imagine him sitting quietly on his porch, a worn hat shading his eyes, remembering the sound of a crackling fire in the Montana wild, a man who conquered the wilderness not through force, but through harmony with it. Sometimes, in those quiet Florida evenings, when the sun slips low and the air hums with the sound of crickets, Tom Orr sits with a cup of coffee and lets his thoughts drift back to the Yaak. The memories come like distant campfire smoke, soft, slow, full of warmth and ache. He remembers the first winter he and Nancy faced together in that tiny cabin, when the snow piled high enough to bury the door, and the only sound for miles was the howl of a wolf. They didn't have much back then, but they had enough: a fire that never went out, each other, and the stubborn will to survive. People often ask him if he ever felt lonely out there in the wild, living days or even weeks without seeing another soul. His answer has always been the same: you're never lonely in the mountains if you know how to listen. For Tom, the wilderness spoke, through the rustle of trees, the snap of branches, the distant cry of an elk. It was a living, breathing companion, one that gave as much as it took. The land demanded respect, and he gave it willingly. Every day was a test of patience, endurance, and gratitude. Even now, decades later, that mindset guides him. Life in Florida might seem easy by comparison, but for Tom, simplicity has always been the key to happiness. He doesn't need much: a modest home, a few tools, and the open air. He still sharpens his knives by hand and repairs old leather gear just to keep busy. Sometimes he makes small gifts for neighbors: handmade belts or keychains, little tokens of the craft that once sustained him through Montana winters. When people recognize him, they're often surprised by how humble he is. "You're Tom Orr from Mountain Men," they say, and he just smiles, tipping his hat. "Used to be," he'll tell them. "Now I'm just Tom." Nancy laughs when people bring up the show. To her, Tom has always been the same man: quiet, thoughtful, and endlessly patient. She's seen the hard times, the trapping seasons that yielded almost nothing, the storms that shook their cabin walls, the lean years when every meal came from the land. Yet through all of it, she says, Tom never complained. He was made for that life, she once said, not because it was easy, but because he understood it. The wilderness didn't scare him. It grounded him. In the years since leaving Montana, the Orrs have found a new rhythm. They spend their mornings tending plants and their afternoons sitting on the porch, watching the world slow down. Occasionally, friends from the show call to check in, And old fans send letters from around the world. Some even drive down to Florida hoping to meet him, not as a celebrity, but as a mentor, a symbol of something pure. Tom welcomes them when he can, always kind but private, never boastful. He listens to their stories, offers a bit of advice, and often ends the visit with his signature line, "Keep it simple. The world's noisy enough." What few people realize is that Tom's journey to the wilderness wasn't just about survival, it was about freedom. Long before mountain men ever existed, he walked away from a conventional life, leaving behind jobs and expectations to live on his own terms. That choice defined him. It wasn't rebellion, it was clarity. He understood something most people forget, that peace doesn't come from possessions, but from purpose. Out there in the snow with nothing but his hands and his will, he found the truest kind of wealth. As the years roll on, Tom's legend continues to grow. Younger generations discover old clips of him setting traps, carving tools, or talking about the simple joys of self-sufficiency. For many, he represents a bridge to a time that feels almost mythic now, a world before smartphones, before constant noise, when a man could measure his worth by the strength of his word and the calluses on his hands. And yet to Tom, there's nothing mythical about it. It was just life, hard, honest, and beautiful in its simplicity. When people thank him for inspiring them, he shrugs it off with that same gentle humility that's defined him all along. "If you can live close to the land," he says, "you'll always find what you need." As night settles and the stars emerge, faint reminders of those cold Montana skies, Tom leans back, closes his eyes, and smiles. The mountains may be far away, but they're never gone. They live in his memory, in his hands, in the quiet rhythm of a man who spent his life listening to the earth and learning its lessons. In that stillness, he remains what he has always been, a mountain man. Not by name, but by spirit. Every now and then, when the Florida air grows cool enough to remind him of Montana nights, Tom Orr steps outside barefoot into the grass and looks up at the sky. It's different here. The stars dimmer, the air heavier, but if he squints hard enough, he can almost see the Big Dipper hanging low over the pines the way it used to above the Yaak. Those quiet moments bring him back, not to fame or cameras, but to the life before all that, when survival was the only rhythm that mattered. He sometimes talks about those early years in the wilderness with a kind of awe. He and Nancy had gone north with little more than determination and a dream of living free. There was no backup plan, no safety net. When the river froze over, they trapped. When the stores ran low, they hunted or went without. It was a life of limits, but also of endless depth. "You learn what you really need when you've got nothing to spare," he said more than once. "You learn what you're made of." Even in Florida, that spirit never left him. His home, though modest, is still full of the tools and tokens of that old life. Handmade traps, weathered knives, bits of antler and bone carved into handles. There's a faded photo of his old cabin tacked above the kitchen doorway. On the porch, his boots sit beside a walking stick that looks as if it's seen 1,000 miles. Tom doesn't need them much these days, but he keeps them close, just in case the mountains ever call again. He still keeps in touch with a few old friends from the Yaak, some of whom stayed behind, unwilling to trade the wilderness for the comfort of civilization. When they talk, it's never about the past in a sentimental way. It's about the seasons, the animals, the weather, the same things they always talked about. To them, the world hasn't changed much. It's just gotten louder. Tom sometimes jokes that while the rest of the world races ahead, he's happy walking backward, one step at a time. For all the years he spent in the public eye, Tom never let fame alter who he was. When Mountain Men first aired, he didn't understand why anyone would want to watch him skin hides or ride horses through the snow. But viewers connected with something deeper, his authenticity, his quiet dignity, his respect for the land. Even now, fans write to tell him how his example changed their lives. Some moved off-grid, some learned leatherwork, others simply found comfort in knowing that such a man existed, that someone could live honestly, quietly, and still find peace. Nancy has said that the letters mean more to Tom than anything else. On evenings when the rain falls hard and the porch lights glow soft, he'll sometimes sit and read a few aloud. Most are simple notes, thank yous, drawings from kids, stories from people who watched him on TV and decided to change their lives. Each one reminds him that what he lived wasn't just a personal choice. It became a kind of roadmap for others seeking truth in a noisy world. And yet, Tom has never claimed to be a teacher. "I just lived," he says. "That's all I ever did." Still, there's something about the way he says it, steady, unhurried, like the voice of a man who's seen storms come and go and knows the earth always finds balance again. He's lived long enough to understand that every life, no matter how hard or humble, is a story worth telling. His just happens to be written in snow, sweat, and silence. As the years pass, people sometimes ask what legacy he wants to leave behind. Tom always gives the same simple answer. "If I can remind folks that there's another way to live, slower, quieter, closer to what's real, then I've done enough." In that single line lies the essence of who he is. No monuments, no awards, no spotlight. Just a man who found freedom in the wild and never let the modern world take it from him. When the night deepens and the sounds of Florida fade to whispers, Tom leans back in his chair, his hands rough and steady, his heart still somewhere out there among the mountains. The cicadas hum like distant wind through pine needles, and for a moment, it's as if the Yaak has followed him here. He closes his eyes and breathes it in, the memory of wood smoke, the bite of frost, the eternal rhythm of nature that shaped him. And though time has carried him far from the snow and the silence, one truth remains. You can take the man out of the mountains, but you can never take the mountains out of the man. Sometimes, early in the morning, before the Florida heat sets in, Tom Orr still rises at dawn out of pure habit. He brews his coffee the old way, slow, black, and strong, then sits on the porch to listen to the day wake up. The birds sound different here, softer somehow, but he still listens for that faraway coyote call that used to echo through the Yaak Valley. It never comes, but in his mind, it always will. Nancy joins him not long after, her hair silver now, her smile as familiar as ever. They don't talk much in those early hours. They don't have to. 40 years in the wilderness taught them that silence can say more than words ever could. She pours her coffee, leans against the railing, and together they watch the sky shift from gray to gold. Even in the quiet Florida air, Tom can almost hear the crack of frozen branches, the crunch of boots in the snow, the whisper of wind moving down from the peaks. Sometimes a car passes on the road beyond the trees, and for a split second the noise breaks the spell. Tom doesn't mind. He's made his peace with the world he returned to. But there's a part of him that still drifts back to that cabin in the wild, to the smell of pine smoke curling up into the cold, to the long winters when the world narrowed to just him, Nancy, and the sound of the fire. People often ask him if he misses it, the wilderness, the show, the old life. He always gives the same half smile and says, "Every day." But then he adds, "I'm lucky. I got to live it for Tom. That's enough." He doesn't dwell on what's gone. He carries it with him instead, quiet and steady, like the knife he still keeps on his belt, not for defense anymore, but as a reminder of who he is. Occasionally fans still track him down. They knock on the gate or send letters through friends, hoping to meet the legendary mountain man. Most are respectful, though Tom prefers his space. He'll greet them kindly, share a story or two, maybe pose for a photo if they ask. But afterward, he always retreats back to his little world. A simple house, a small workshop, and the woman who stood beside him through everything. That workshop is where the old Tom still lives. The smell of leather fills the air, and his tools are laid out neatly, just as they were in Montana. He spends hours shaping, stitching, and burnishing by hand, each piece a small echo of the life he once lived. When the light hits just right, you can almost imagine him back in his mountain cabin, the firelight flickering on his face as he works in silence. He doesn't make many items these days. His hands aren't as steady as they used to be. But every piece carries the same care, the same patience. People who buy them say they can feel something in the craftsmanship, as if each stitch holds a memory. And maybe it does. Every crease in the leather, every mark of the knife tells a story of survival, endurance, and quiet strength. Nancy sometimes helps him pack up the finished goods, just like she used to. They sell them at small fairs or give them to friends. Money was never the point. It's about staying connected to the work, the rhythm, the life they built together from nothing. When the evenings roll in, Tom and Nancy sit outside again, the air thick and buzzing with crickets. Sometimes they'll talk about the old days, the wolves that used to howl through the trees, the nights when the temperature dropped so low that even boiling water froze in seconds. They laugh about the hardships now, the endless repairs, the broken traps, the hungry winters. Back then, those moments were struggles. Now, they're treasures. Tom often says that life in the wild wasn't just about survival. It was about honesty. Out there, you can't lie to yourself, he says. The land doesn't let you. Maybe that's what people admired about him most, his truth. In a world full of pretense, Tom Orr lived without any. He didn't need validation, didn't need comfort. He just needed the earth beneath him, the wind on his face, and the woman who believed in him. Even now, when the aches come and his breath shortens, he carries no regret. He's said more than once that the wilderness gave him everything he ever wanted, and took nothing he wasn't willing to give. Some nights, when the moon hangs low, he walks the edge of his property, barefoot in the grass, and stares up at the stars. He'll point out the constellations, remembering how he used to navigate by them on long winter nights. The stars are softer here, muted by distance and city light, but to Tom, they still shine bright enough. He sometimes whispers to the mountains he left behind, a quiet promise that he hasn't forgotten them, because in his heart, he never truly left. Florida is where his body rests, but Montana will always be where his soul belongs. And that, perhaps, is the truest legacy of Tom Orr. Not the fame, not the show, not even the legend, but the idea that a man can live on his own terms, love deeply, and leave behind a world quieter than he found it. When the morning comes again, Tom will rise once more, pour his coffee, and greet the sun. Another day, another breath, another moment of peace. The wilderness may be far away, but its lessons, patience, humility, and gratitude live in him still. In the end, what they found inside Tom Orr's cabin wasn't disturbing in the way people might expect. It wasn't secrets or darkness. It was something far rarer, a pure, unfiltered life carved out of the raw edge of the world. A place built not from comfort, but from courage. A home filled with silence, memory, and love, the kind that endures when everything else fades. And as the sun slips below the horizon and the Florida sky turns crimson, Tom Orr, the last great mountain man, sits quietly, content at last, living proof that you don't have to conquer the wilderness to belong to it forever.